Hi, I'm Eric Yellen. I'm a professor in the history department here at Richmond, and I teach 20th century U.S. history.
Hi, I'm Joanne Chula. I'm from the Jepson School, and I teach ethics.
Hi, Rob Phillips. I teach business ethics in the business school.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikita Kanpal. I'm a junior government and politics major from College Park, Maryland.
My name is Rachel Walsh. I'm a sophomore philosophy major.
Hi, my name is Natasha Kenworthy Rodriguez. I'm a junior double major in politics and government and philosophy.
I'm Luis Rodriguez. I'm a freshman major, double major in government, politics, and economics.
I'm James Sensor. I'm James Sensor. I'm James Sensor. I'm a senior government politics major.
We're going to work on the microphone situation. Okay. Let's go over to Clemson.
I'm Nikki Powell. I'm a junior microbiology major.
I'm Nancy Appling. I'm also a microbiology major.
I'm Callie Jean. I'm a political science major.
I'm Spencer Taylor. I'm a sophomore biology major.
And I'm Courtney Dixon. I'm a junior double majoring in philosophy and political science.
For the Maryland team, I just sent someone running after our technicians, so they will turn your volume up, but you do have lights, correct? Yes? Okay. So since Maryland got to introduce themselves first, I'm going to let Clemson call the coin toss, okay? So Clemson called tails, and it was indeed tails. So would you like to take the first case?
We would like to present second.
You would like to present the second case. Okay. So that means University of Maryland, you will be presenting the first case today. And the case that you'll be presenting, it's case number 1, minding your ethics. So your question, and I will get you a copy. Are we all good, Brian? Yeah. Okay. We're going to get you a copy as well as a copy for the Clemson team. Case number 1, minding your ethics. Your question, should John confront the men about their beliefs? If so, why? If not, why not? So let me give you a copy. Give Clemson a copy. Okay, so minding your ethics, should John confront the men about their beliefs? If so, why? If not, why not? I'm going to give you 2 minutes, Maryland, to confer before you present your case. Would you like a verbal warning or a written warning at 1 minute?
Yes, please. Verbal's fine.
Verbal's fine? Okay. You may go ahead and confer amongst yourselves. That's 1 minute left. Okay, that's time. So I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock. Marilyn, you now have 10 minutes for one person to present your case. Would you like a 5-minute, 1-minute warning?
Yes, 1 minute would be.
Minute? Okay. Okay, you may begin.
Okay. So just to reiterate the question, should John confront the man about their beliefs? First, I'd like to give a little bit of background information on what's going on in this case. John is a man who enters a bar, and a few feet away, there's a few men having a conversation about their beliefs about homosexuality. They believe that homosexuality is a sign of moral decay within our society. So John happens to disagree with them. He claims that gay rights are an important issue to him. So the question is John obligated to defend his beliefs? So just to directly answer the question, should John confront the men about his beliefs, our team believes the answer to that is no. Your personal moral convictions are very highly personal, private information. They're these notions, beliefs that you have about the world. If John were expected to confront the men and explain his reasoning and his beliefs, he would be forced to let these people into this private issue about himself. He would have to expose himself. This may reveal a lot of things about John. It may reveal, for example, that he's perceptive to power differentials, that he's interested deeply in justice. It says a lot about a person, the issues that matter to them. Our team believes that your personal convictions are a form of private information. Now ask yourselves, is there ever a situation where we're obliged to elicit our private information about ourselves? And we believe, with the exception of maybe contractual agreements, that the answer to that is no. We are not obliged to publicly defend our convictions, and I will explain our response in 2 parts. Firstly, I will address how our convictions are private, and second, I will address how it's impractical to expect people to defend all their convictions. So, privacy means the ability to control who, when, and to what extent personal information about yourself is communicated to others. It's highly important because what we communicate to others is the way in which we define ourselves. It's the way we develop our identities. We may choose to tell people certain things about ourselves. We may choose to keep secret certain things about ourselves for a multitude of reasons. Through eliciting information about ourselves to other people is the way that we control and maintain our social relationships. Because if we all went around, for example, stating every moral declaration that occurred to us, a lot of people might have problems with us. You might choose not to mention a strong moral belief if you're in a group of people because it might cause outrage, it might cause rejection or misunderstanding or judgment. So the reason that it's impractical to be expected to defend your convictions is because essentially we all have convictions when it comes to almost any issue. And at that, they might be, half-baked, like semi-formed opinions. So if we all went around making declarations on everything we believed, we wouldn't have a way to emphasize what means the most to us. We wouldn't have a way to draw attention to the issues that deserve the most attention. To be obliged to defend your convictions in public is essentially to be a slave to your convictions. And we do not believe that you should be obliged publicly to defend your beliefs. So, what our team thinks is very important is that not all opportunities to defend your convictions are very good ones. Take John's case, for example. He's in a bar. These men may or may not have been drinking. They may or may not be thinking rationally. And in confronting him, he could be facing the possibility of a physical altercation. Sometimes, when we defend our convictions, it leads to harm caused to us. Would we expect a person that lives under a particularly oppressive regime of government to defend even a small moral stance if it meant persecution? In a lot of societies, not persecution, prosecution. In a lot of societies, excuse me 1 second. There are many instances when substantial harm is caused to ourselves by defending what we believe. As I mentioned earlier, it could be misjudgment, it could be misunderstanding, but what it could be is incrimination. It could be punishment. In this case, it could be facing the potential of a fight. So, as I said, not all opportunities are good opportunities. Another situation, and this is something John is particularly concerned about, is that he believes he cannot, not always, accurately portray his own views. He might do a bad job at arguing his perspective. Now, this is something to take into consideration. Presumably the goal, or the motive behind a proponent of obligatory conviction defending, presumably that goal would be something like to bring about social change. You need to defend your beliefs in order to stick up for them and activate change within our society. So that's a counter-argument that I'd like to address. If we look at this issue historically, it's not the case that if you're not obliged to defend, people won't defend. It just so happens that a lot of the times the people who fight the longest, who fight the hardest, are the people that are motivated by moral imperatives and not, for example, economic reasons or highly politicized reasons. So going back to what I was saying earlier, there's the potential that he could misrepresent his cause. He could actually do more harm to his movement. He could actually work against that goal of changing society by improperly defending his ideas. There's the possibility he could push people away from him or portray it in a way that made people not believe what he was saying because he was so bad at defending his argument. So, just to sum everything up, we believe that John should not, unless he wants to, confront this man about his beliefs. We believe that nobody is obliged to defend their moral convictions. First of all, because convictions are private information about ourselves. We should have the power to decide our personal information, the way it's communicated to others. Second of all, it's impractical to be expected to defend your convictions. Besides the inability to emphasize what's important, you face the possibility of causing more harm to that issue that means so much to you. You face the potential of doing more harm than helping the situation. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to reset the clock now, and Clemson, you'll have 1 minute to confer before you provide your commentary. Okay? Go ahead. So I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock. Clemson, you have 5 minutes to deliver your commentary. You can have multiple presenters, but one person needs to speak at a time. Okay? Would you like a verbal warning at any time?
Just a hand signal.
A hand signal at 1 minute? Okay. All right, you may begin.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'd first like to thank you. We'd like to bring up the fact that you did not quite address the question. You seem to have answered the question as to whether or not he's obligated, and then at the end of your presentation, you threw in there that maybe he should, maybe he shouldn't, it's up to him. But the question proposed was, should John confront these men, not is he ethically obligated to. You also seem to make blanket statements that there's situations where no one should voice their opinions, that opinions are a private matter, that everyone is entitled to their own opinion and there should be no flow of ideas. And we also completely disagree with this, this notion. Although you go along with the virtue of prudence, we thought that it would really strengthen your argument along the obligation lines, even though it's not quite answering the should lines, to just talk about prudence. You did say that there is alcohol consumption and he had an inability to, he believed he had an inability to articulate well. This is good. However, you should have specifically cited prudence as a reason why, that he was acting with caution because of this inability, not just the inability completely should have him not address the question at all. There are situations where people are not prepared but still will take action, and you can never be completely prepared for a situation. So maybe a factor in the fact that the case specifically says he has a long day, so that kind of sets a frame of mind and might have justified your answer a little more. I'm going to pass this on to my colleagues and then bring it back.
So I'd first like to clarify the difference between obligation and should, so we can clarify exactly how you did not answer the question. We would say, for example, that I should give money to the homeless, but that doesn't mean that I have an obligation to hand out cash to every single homeless person I see. You can clearly see that there's a distinction between these two ideas. And so while they're kind of along similar-ish lines, they're not the same thing. And so we would just really like to hear your response on should rather than obligation. And then furthermore, given that you presented a case on obligation, we'd like to critique the case you gave a little bit. You mentioned that people should only talk about what means the most to them, or people shouldn't be obligated to talk about everything because we wouldn't be able to tell the difference between what was really important to them and what wasn't. But in the case, it specifically states that it says John has a number of homosexual friends and their standing in society is an important issue for him. And so if whether the issue is important is a factor to you, this is clearly an important issue to John.
In regards to the never being required to express your beliefs, we would like to share a situation where we feel you should express your beliefs. In school, if a teacher were to encounter children talking badly about other gay students, we feel like the teacher should uphold the school's tolerance policy and express their belief of not saying those harmful things to make the school a safe environment for the students.
There also should be a distinction between discrimination and prejudice. These men were being prejudicial. They were having, they had preconceived notions about a group of people that they held strongly, but they weren't acting upon them. If these men had been acting upon them, let's say they were saying, well, I can't stand homosexuals, there's that guy that lives down the street, Johnny, we should go get him. I know where he lives, I know where his car is, we can key his car, we can do damage. Just because, do you still believe that John does not have an obligation to speak to these men? Do you think that he should not? Because there's a thin line between prejudice and discrimination. These men might go out and act upon this prejudice. This is the case in a number of instances. Preconceived notion or misunderstanding of a situation can lend itself to harm to a great number of people. A brief example would be, I know that in Africa, a lot of the time they believe that misconceptions about HIV lend itself to some men believing that if they have sex with a virgin, it will in fact cure their HIV. Because of this, do you think that if John maybe had heard that statement, of course he has an opposing point of view, he doesn't think that that's right, he knows that that's not right, do you think he has an obligation or that he should confront these men in a situation such as that, something that lends itself to harm? In conclusion, we really would like to know your answer to the question, should John confront these men? We think that you gave examples of why he may not be obligated, but these could have been strengthened maybe by some virtues. We gave examples of situations in which confronting the men would be more beneficial than withholding one's views. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. I'm going to clear the clock, and I'm going to give Maryland 1 minute to confer before you respond to that commentary. Okay, Maryland, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to respond to the commentary that Clemson provided. There can be multiple speakers, but just one person at a time, okay? And I'll give you a 1-minute verbal warning. Okay, you may begin.
Thank you, Clemson, for your very thoughtful response. There seems to be confusion about what our argument is, so I will reiterate it for you. So you believe that we have avoided the question in some way, but we would like to maintain that we haven't. So the question is, should John confront the men about their beliefs? Now, whether you think that implies obligation, the word should or not, it is our stance that John is not obligated to defend his beliefs. Now, we believe that the choice, should John confront these people, the choice to confront these people should be left up to John's discretion. Within our response, we explained there are many factors. And there's many factors about John we simply don't know. John says, homosexuality means a lot to me, but we have no idea to what degree it means a lot to him. John himself could be gay. John's roommates could be gay. We have no idea the degree of importance this issue holds for John. We also can't be aware of the certain conditions that he's facing. Now, he has certain concerns, and the reason we think the way to respond should be left up to John's discretion, the individual in the moment, is because the individual must assess in detail the situation. You must assess, do the harms, the potential harms that I'm going to face outweigh the benefits this conversation could give to others? Am I actually going to make an influence on these people's ideas? Because what's the point if they're not going to be receptive, if they're not arguing rationally? There are many dimensions to this. There are so many dimensions. And the reason that it's so specific is because this is personal information. Now, I have a lot of personal beliefs, a lot of things I think, but there's a lot of things I wouldn't want to be voicing in certain venues to certain people. We are granting John the ability to decide where and when he wants to defend his convictions. We do not believe there's one way that he should or is obligated to respond to this situation. It is our belief that it's up to the individual to assess the situation and decide what it means to them. What is the most appropriate way for me to respond in this instance with these circumstances? Because to say what John should do is imply that we're sure of a preferable stance. We're sure we have a preferred opinion on what John should do. But in fact, it's not us that's facing the potential harm. These issues are so complicated, they must be confronted as they're happening.
Sorry. I wanted to address the HIV example that you brought up, that there are people in Africa that believe that having sex with a virgin will alleviate HIV. We don't feel, our argument is based on a moral disagreement. The HIV thing, that's just a factual disagreement. You're not going to get cured of HIV by having sex with somebody who's a virgin. That's just a fact. Whether or not gay is a deteriorating society, the whole idea of what's society and what's moral, it's a much more broad. You can't just use empirical evidence to say, well, no, that's wrong. You can say, oh, no, that's wrong. If you have sex with a virgin, it doesn't get rid of HIV. So it's our argument that we're making is for things that are moral disagreements. In that particular example, we don't feel applies to a moral disagreement.
To elaborate on that, if there is a belief that harm is imminent based on the discussion you're overhearing, you're not obligated to go and intervene. There's other recourses that you could use to alleviate the potential harm that you're now aware of. There is calling the police. There is informing a party that otherwise is going to be harmed. You don't have to get involved with those potentially doing the violence to fix the situation. It doesn't require you going outside of your comfort zone or divulging information, private information about you to be moral in this situation.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm now going to give the judges a minute to confer and sort of identify what it is that they want to ask the Maryland team, and then we'll go into the question and answer period. Okay, so the judges each have the opportunity to ask a question with a follow-up, and we're going to be passing one microphone back and forth, so we'll try to keep it managed up here. We're not tearing microphone out of each other's hands. You all do have a moment to confer if you'd like to in response to a question. And again, anybody can respond, but just one person at a time. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to the judges, and then I'll start the timer so that they can get it to the appropriate person.
Thank you, both of you. It's hard work. The first thing, I guess I want to ask about the question of truth, right? This is, and whether, if the question here is a question of dialogue, right? Should there be some kind of question and answer period between these two groups, right? And if we follow a Socratic model, then there's a moral obligation for the search for truth. Socrates said the way to do that is to talk. And so where is truth in this, in your way of looking at the question, right? And is there a moral obligation to seek truth?
So the moral issue at question where we find this truth for his situation is homosexuality a sign of moral decay in our society versus John's opinion that it's not. So that's the topic that they're discussing. So your question is, was it where's the truth?
Is truth
a component?
Question or element of truth play a role in your?
Okay, yes. So specifically, we addressed how, not all opportunities to defend your ideas are good ones. So it's apparent, it's pretty obvious what we personally believe is the truth in this situation, but we want to address it from, which is that homosexuality is not a sign of decay in our society. But from John's particular perspective, he also believes that is the truth. So how do individuals go about bringing this truth out? So it might be the case that for a particular political or moral movement, say in this case gay rights, that maybe more sparse, obvious big displays of protest are more effective than every conversation with a group of drunk men at a bar. Seeking truth, the most effective means to seeking truth, to letting the public become aware, there might be a more strategic manner in which that truth can be attained. And that, in a way, is how John assessing the situation really comes about. Because he actually could draw people away from his truth by arguing poorly or ineffectively or misrepresenting the idea. So that's why we think you have to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. Nobody knows the moral convictions and the moral situation and the consequences more than the individual that holds the belief. So John's belief in truth, as I stated, might have a more strategic and effective manner of bringing this truth out than just confronting these men.
Okay, thank you. Both very interesting arguments here. I guess you started with a very interesting argument about the personal nature of moral beliefs. You said moral beliefs are private. And so what I'm wondering is, what would the world be like if moral beliefs were really private for everyone? And would you want everyone to act? I'm asking you a content question, philosophy majors up here. But we have to think about your argument in terms of what it actually would mean. And so I'm wondering, explain to me, if everybody did this, if moral beliefs are private, which we can raise a question about, does that make sense to say moral beliefs are private? So I'd need to know what that argument is. And then the second one is, if they're not private, what is the criteria which would obligate you to actually speak up in this situation? What is the criteria? What would make a difference to you?
Okay. So to address the first question, why are moral beliefs private?
Or are they private?
Or are they? Okay.
Right.
So we believe that they are private. And the reason is because our personal beliefs hold within them a lot of deeply personal information about ourselves. Like, for a particular example, if I were to make a certain feminist argument, me defending that claim, that conviction in public, would expose a lot of things about me. It would show where my priorities are. It shows like the way that I assess situations. You know, maybe I'm a feminist. Maybe these issues matter a lot to me. And I think the way that we feel, our personal beliefs about moral situations are private. And a reason for that is because sometimes by exposing that, we can face harm to ourselves. We as individuals choose not to expose a lot of our convictions, and for reasons. And this, I think, ties into the second part of your question. So what if everybody was obliged, what if nobody was obliged to defend your convictions? You're saying, how would that play out in the real world, right? Okay, so I tried to talk about this a little bit earlier, like historically speaking. Just because an individual isn't morally obliged doesn't mean they won't personally be compelled to defend what they believe. For example, I don't feel like I'm obliged to speak my opinions about issues, but I will when I'm encountered with them, if I think I can affect change, if I can make these people rethink the argument. Because when you actually believe something for moral reasons, many people, I think most people, for at least one or two issues, are willing to put themselves on the line, even their lives in certain situations, to defend those principles. I mean, that's how we've seen progression in our society. We've gone from this like medieval, the structure of government, like a totalitarianism form of government, to now many modernized countries operate under democracy. You know, we no longer, or at least we don't believe it's okay to indulge in slavery. And the reason that these progressions are happening is because people are, in fact, sticking up for things they believe, even though they're not obliged.
So I was struck by the word confront in the question. And then you guys suggested that maybe we wouldn't be able to adequately defend our position because our beliefs are half-baked, I think you said. Right, and it strikes me that the fact that my beliefs are half-baked might be some good reason to engage with my fellow citizens about what they believe, and sort of fully bake my beliefs. So what if I use the word, instead of confront, what if I use the word engage? To what extent, if at all, would that change your answer to the question?
I don't think it would change our response to the question, merely because we don't think there's a way that he should particularly address anything. That's not to discredit, conversation and discussion. We just think that some maybe venues like a bar maybe aren't the most appropriate venue to engage with people. I mean, for all we know, John could be a gay activist in his real life, making change all the time. But this might just not be the proper place. But we do think and place an extreme amount of value on conversation between individuals.
Okay, I'm going to give the judges a few moments now to tabulate scores in regards to that first case. And we're going to remove all your scrap paper and get it out of your way so that you don't have any vestiges of the first case before we move on.
Excuse me.
She'll come back. Yeah, I think there's one. So you might just...
I think that's going to be fine.
They made it better for you guys this year. You used to have to go from... Yeah, we used to go to... All right. Are we good, judges? Okay. So, Clemson, you have your opportunity to present now, and you have case number 3. I'm going to give you a copy of the case as well as the question. I'll bring a copy to Maryland as well. And so, case number 3 is the Spanish ban on bullfighting. And your question is, do you think bullfighting should be banned as animal cruelty? If so, why? And if not, why not? So I'm going to give you all 2 minutes to confer before you present your case. All right? Go ahead. Okay, so Clemson, I will put 10 minutes on the clock, and one of you can present your case. Would you like any kind of notice at 5 minutes, at 1 minute?
Just a hand.
At hand?
Yeah.
At 1 or at 5? Or both?
Both, please.
Okay, sure. Okay, you may begin.
In response to the question, do you think bullfighting should be banned as animal cruelty?
Clemson would respond that yes, bullfighting should be banned as animal cruelty. We will argue this based on Kant's implications on for the treatment of animals, the virtue of civility, and utilitarianism, and we will also consider some objections to our case. Kant's implications of the treatment of animals is a way that Kant provided that we should take into account animal rights. We have an indirect duty to treat animals in a good way because it in turn makes us better people. There is some evidence that supports this in that children who are found to repeatedly get enjoyment from torturing animals have a hard time faring in social situations. So it's an indication that treating animals badly could lead to not being able to interact well with people. So through this argument, we can see that animal cruelty is not good for us and therefore unethical. And now we have to address whether or not bullfighting is animal cruelty now. Before the bull goes to the fight, it is raised in a very good way. They live on a big pasture where they are allowed to eat as much free-range grass as they want. They never see a human until a few days before the fight. They are kept in a dark room where they have a lot of pre-fight acts done to them. They have chemicals rubbed on their legs to irritate them, Vaseline rubbed in their eyes and nose to kind of distort their senses. They're given stimulants or depressants to alter their mood. And basically, the point is to aggravate the animal so that it will respond in the appropriate way for the fight. So we would say that yes, bullfighting is animal cruelty, and by this Kant's implications, we should not treat the animals in this way because it will make us worse. And something that we found very important to this is that the harm done to these animals is absolutely intrinsic to bullfighting. One could imagine being able to genetically modify a bull so that they couldn't feel pain, therefore it wouldn't be necessarily cruel and harmful to them. However, the bull would not respond correctly in the fight, and the fight would not be enjoyable. So since the harm is absolutely intrinsic to the bullfight, Kant's implications definitely apply. Our second argument is based on the virtue of civility. And by this we mean that a virtuous person will act in a way that is civil or respectful and not brutal or savagely cruel. Since the bull is so debilitated beforehand and also debilitated during the fight with very specific attacks that are specifically designed to first inhibit their ability to raise their head. Then they're kind of put lances in its back so it is unable to use its horns as well. It is kind of a very brutal treatment to this animal. And we feel that the virtue of civility would apply not only to the matador, but to the audience participating. The matador is the one kind of the one that is forcing this brutal act, but the audience is participating in it as well. They are getting enjoyment from the pain of the animal and the brutal treatment of the animal. So through the virtue of civility, which they are not following in a bullfight, we can see that bullfighting would be considered animal cruelty and then also should be banned because of this. One might object that a lot of people in Spain consider bullfighting an art form and therefore should be protected and excused from animal cruelty laws, which it currently is in a lot of places in Spain. However, we would say this is not a very good objection. Just because something is considered art does not give it freedom from ethicality. For example, you could say a serial killer is expressing themselves in an artistic way when they commit their murders in such a specific artistic way. However, this is clearly not ethical, even though it's considered art by them. We'll now look at utilitarianism as another way to enforce why bullfighting should be banned as animal cruelty.
The benefits of bullfighting are that it allows for a freedom of expression of the matador to express his ability to conquer death and conquer nature. It provides a small amount of jobs for people involved in bullfighting and a small amount of tourism revenue. And finally, it's a benefit to the 7.2% of the population in Spain that actually enjoys bullfighting. Now, the costs of bullfighting are that 500 million euros each year are spent on bullfighting from Spanish tax dollars. However, the people never really see a return in this tax money. This is especially bad because 72% of Spain has no interest in bullfighting, and out of those people, 60% of Spain is strongly against bullfighting. So if we look at utilitarianism, it shows that there are more costs to allowing bullfighting to stay around than there are benefits. So in conclusion, one might also object that since bullfighting is a part of the Spanish culture, it should be protected as well. This is different from it being a form of art. It has been around for a long time, and people feel that it should continue to stay in Spain. However, we can see that there has been a great shift away from it being a part of their culture. Since a great majority of people don't even enjoy watching a bullfight anymore, we can see that it is no longer a part of their culture, and this should not be considered. Even if it were a part of their culture, it would not be ethical for them to keep it around because of the other contentions we showed at the beginning of our argument. So now, finally, in conclusion, we have shown with Kant's implications for the treatment of animals that bullfighting is animal cruelty and should be banned because doing so would help make us better people. Therefore, it would be ethical to ban it. The virtue of civility shows that we are not being civil and virtuous people when we participate in or even watch a bullfight. Therefore, again, it should be banned. And utilitarianism shows that it's not even there aren't even more benefits to keeping it around, so it definitely should be banned because of this. And finally, we have considered the objections that it is art and a part of their culture, therefore should be kept around, but we have shown that these objections are not good objections. Thank you.
Clemson, you're finished?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm going to clear the clock, and I'm going to give Maryland a moment to confer, 1 minute, before you present your commentary, okay? Are you prepared? You want to give your commentary? Okay, hang on. Okay, I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock. All of you can add to the commentary one at a time. And would you like any signal at any point, a 1 minute warning or 1 minute verbal or?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You may begin.
Okay. We do agree with the stance that bullfighting should be considered animal cruelty. However, they used a lot of terms of theoretical ethics, and we think that if you argue this on terms of theoretical ethics, you put yourself into a pretty deep hole. First off, for them talking about utilitarianism, and they say 72% of the country opposes it, but the idea of utilitarianism is the greatest good for the greatest number of people, the greatest overall good, the total amount of joy. So if there's one guy that feels the joy that overweighs the pain of 1,000 bulls getting killed. Every time a bull gets killed, then the overall, joy, the overall good is still going to be better. Even if you got so many people that feel badly against it, if one guy feels so much joy when it happens, that's going to override that if you're talking about theoretical utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Also, they talk about Kantianism, and a big idea behind Kantianism is the categorical imperative, which is it's the intent of an action, not the actual consequences of an action that determine whether or not it's moral. So if you want to go back to that idea that we bullfight as art, bullfighting is a form of artistic expression, if you say that's the intent of bullfighting, you can't say it's immoral under Kantianism. And Rachel would also like to deal with the idea of virtue ethics in terms of theoretical ethical justifications for this.
So you brought up a case of virtue, and that's a really interesting perspective in this case. So I'd like to explain why we believe this is a significant factor. So the virtuous person, the moral person, is characterized because they have a certain set of sensitivities. Now, one of these sensitivities that the moral person has is a sensitivity to vulnerability. Some examples are vulnerability of the young, of the sick, of people that are scared. And in this case, the vulnerability is really that the animal faces, the vulnerability of being tortured, the vulnerability of facing certain death. So to derive amusement from a situation where the vulnerability of an animal is leading to its death is really to be a poor reflection of character. And now Luis is going to address some other practical elements of this case.
Okay, so first of all, we think that your response to the argument from culture in defense of bullfighting could be enhanced by looking at the particularities of this case. This is technically about a Catalan ban on bullfighting, and Catalonia is one of the provinces in Spain that has a very distinct culture, and they suffered greatly under the Francoist regime. So consequently, they are extremely suspicious of Spanish nationalism. So you could look at this as defending this, because it is an aspect of Spanish culture, would be imposing on the Catalans a culture that is not theirs, that they don't think they should have to uphold. And then secondly, we think that we arrive at the same conclusion using some slightly different grounds. We extended that whole argument about how the vast majority of Spaniards are in favor of banning bullfighting. We think that Spaniards ought to be able to define their own culture, within certain limits, of course. We think we should, of course, balance fundamental rights with this argument, but we don't think that there's a fundamental right to enjoy a bullfight. So we think that in this paradigm, it is perfectly acceptable for the Spanish regional governments or the Spanish national government to ban bullfighting because Spaniards have decided that they have the moral right to determine their culture, and that they no longer wish to be associated with a practice that they consider to be cruel and unusual towards animals.
And when it comes down to it, Catalonia really is a democracy. One of the principles of democracy is to be a reflection of the will of the people. In this case, we believe that they have a right to define their culture, and they have a right to have their voices heard when it comes to the policies that their country enacts. Thank you.
You completed, Maryland, with your, okay. Okay, I'm gonna give Clemson a moment to confer before you respond to the commentary. Okay, Clemson, I'm putting 5 minutes on the clock. I'll give you a 1-minute warning with a hand signal. Is that okay? Okay. And again, all of you can certainly respond as long as you do that one at a time. You may begin.
Thank you guys for your response. We are glad that you agree with our standpoint, and we feel like a lot of the things you brought up actually enforce the case that we were originally making. I'm going to first turn it over to my colleagues to talk further about some of the things you brought up.
Your first objection was regarding the fact that we used utilitarian theory in our argument. And you said that because it is a theoretical argument, it wasn't really pertinent, I think. And you said, you brought up that, you brought up the Achilles heel of utilitarianism, which is if you have one person that feels really, really strongly about this, it'll do that person more good than it would collectively do a bunch of people if they just, they wouldn't really benefit that much from going the other way. However, we feel that this is unlikely in these circumstances, and furthermore, that utilitarianism is pertinent to the situation. If we were to focus on that specific problem with utilitarianism, then we couldn't really use it to analyze any question. So we think that our use of utilitarianism is justified, and furthermore...
you said specifically that one person can feel so strongly about something that it really justifies everything else. Let me bring up Hitler. I'm sure he felt really, really glad that the Jews were gone. He wanted an Aryan nation. He wanted racial purity. However, the happiness he feels does not justify killing a people. It's an illogical situation that's saying one person's happiness can override another being's pain, no matter how numerous that being's pain may be.
And furthermore, there are multiple conceptions of how you add up the good in a utilitarian argument. So for example, instead of an aggregate good, you can do an average good, something of that sort. And so we never said that it was the greatest good for the greatest number. And so you kind of imposed your understanding of utilitarianism on our arguments.
I would like to respond to your question or your comment about the Spanish culture and that in Catalan, or they're imposing on a culture that is not there. I do agree that the Catalan culture is very different from the rest of Spain. I actually spent last semester in Spain, and they shoved that down my throat. But I think we did address it in our argument that animal cruelty trumps this, and I think that is what my colleague meant to say by bringing up the objection of culturalism. And I'd also like to say that the question was whether bullfighting should be banned as animal cruelty, not whether bullfighting should be protected as a cultural right. And I believe that we addressed the question adequately and answered it in our in our presentation.
Yeah, so to kind of emphasize that point, your last two arguments were entirely about the Spanish culture, why we didn't talk about the Spanish culture, about the will of the people. That really wasn't the question that was asked. The question was based on animal cruelty laws.
All right. Another point that I would like to make is that we did consider that if you look at the intent of bullfighting, it is art, yet you still cannot say that art is excused from moral or ethical guidelines. And we did point this out using an example that something that one person considers their artistic expression doesn't mean that it's ethical. It still has to be looked at with moral guidelines. And we did, even if you weren't satisfied with Kant's view on this, we did use other moral considerations to further this point, why it's unethical. And you brought up something about our virtue argument, and this basically was exactly what we said, that the people were deriving amusement and entertainment from the harming of this animal, and therefore it does not make us virtuous people. So to sum everything up, first we forced how our utilitarian argument definitely applies and is not thrown off by the objection you brought up to it. We considered that your objection about them having the right to define their own culture is not really relevant to the question that was brought up, and we have also shown how we did in fact consider that art is cannot just automatically be considered free from morality, and shown that we definitely have the same view as you with the consideration of virtues. Thank you.
Clemson, are you finished with your response? Okay. All right, I'm going to give the judges a moment to confer in regards to the questions. Okay, I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock, so each judge, again, has the opportunity to ask a question as well as a follow-up, and you all may confer briefly before responding to questions. Anyone can respond to the question so long as it's one person at a time. So I'm going to hand the microphone over.
Again, congratulations. It was nice work. And I think that the quality of both of your presentations explains why my question may be too hard, but it's the best one I can come up with. It's what you've left me with. I think that's what I want to say. Which is, there's two ways to ask the question. I'll ask them both. You can decide which. One is there evidence that Kant was right? In other words, if we treat animals poorly, could we become crueler? That's one way of asking it. The other way of asking it is, are Catalonians crueler than other Spaniards? Right? Does your argument require that we believe that because, say, a certain percentage of Catalonians support bullfighting, those people are therefore, according to Kant, brutal people?
We did briefly address this in our case, that children who kind of treat animals badly are not very socially adept, and also a lot of serial killers were found to, or sociopaths were found to get enjoyment from abusing animals when they were younger.
And also, we've seen fairly often that if you look at bullies in high school or something of that sort, they were the same kids who were pulling the wings off of flies in kindergarten. And so there have been psychological studies that show certainly a correlation, quite possibly a causation between the two.
It's due to a lack of empathy. They are not feeling empathy towards other beings, and they are expressing it in a violent manner.
What about Zimbardo's? That's not quite the same, but it might be correct.
There's a further study, Zimbardo's famous Stanford prison study, that may not exactly answer the question, but it can certainly be pertinent in that we can see that the role that one plays certainly influences the action of that person. So if you have a role as a torturer, this may be expanded to be beyond animals.
So people who, for example, the picadors and the people who are actively hurting the bull, they're in this role where they have to do harm to other creatures, and this harms their ability to feel empathy. And we can see the same thing with the viewers. They're in this role where they're enjoying this pain and suffering of this creature, and the creature's terrified, and this role may make them even more bloodthirsty. Not, well, bloodthirsty like the sort of, they want to see more. Or, I think it was.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, Catalan was the one that banned it. It was, yeah, it was the rest of Spain that has bullfighting.
Catalonia was.
Yeah, they banned bullfighting.
Yeah. We got your meeting.
Let's see, a couple times you've made several arguments. One was that that moral considerations trumped art and moral considerations trumped culture. You asserted those views, but you didn't give me an argument. So why is it that moral considerations are more important than cultural practices or all of the things we think of with art, artistic freedom as a part of a culture? What's your argument for why that's the case?
The argument for why morality should trump culture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, first off, one of the basic principles of the conception of rights is that some rights will inevitably trump others in some situations. And so, my right to swing my fist ends where it meets your face, that sort of thing. And so the right to people to, to not be harmed in certain ways, so for example, the serial killer aspect, the right of someone to not be murdered certainly trumps the right of someone to make art that involves someone being killed.
It definitely has to do with the nature of the art. We felt the nature of this art was very violent and devious, and all in all incorporated animal cruelty. And it was the nature that made us say that morality would trump that art.
And if you extend the definition of art or culture, art is really anything that someone does to express themselves. So if you extend this, you could really consider anything art. So there has to be some kind of bounds to ensure that there is morality. Otherwise, we wouldn't really have any basis to judge anything on.
So Kant also made a pretty big deal out of dignity, right? And you don't have to answer this in Kantian terms exclusively, but my question is, even given the extraordinary disadvantages that the bull has that you elaborated on, I wonder if it's still a fighting chance compared to the slaughterhouse. And so if there's some respect for bovine dignity, or are we committing ourselves to vegetarianism if we take your claims?
Well, first we would say that the slaughterhouses as they are currently constructed are ethically problematic. They do great harm to the animals on the way to them being killed, in the same way that bullfighting harms the animals greatly. And we tend to draw the line for moral relevancy, I guess, on the ability to have interests and to be self-recognizing. And so, for example, an animal that is self-recognizing is able to be harmed in many ways that one that has interests simply is not. And we feel that bulls are they aren't self-recognizing. They can't pass mirror self-recognition tests or any comparable tests that work towards the skills of bulls. And so we would argue that simply killing an animal isn't necessarily wrong, simply because since they aren't self-recognizing, they don't lose very much in being killed. But killing them in a way that is extremely harmful and causes much pain before they die violates their interests.
Part of our argument was based on civility and getting pleasure from watching suffering, and we feel like it's a lot different from, I don't know, the point of a slaughterhouse. While it is awful, the point is to eat the meat that comes from it. So we think that there is a distinction between these. Also, Spain does kill and eat the bull afterwards. So we didn't think that it was ethically wrong for them to continue to eat the bull, just the manner in which they were doing so.
All right, well, thank you very much, Clemson. I'm at this time going to give the judges some time to tabulate, and I'm going to tabulate, so we'll be back to you in a moment. So before we announce the winner of the semifinal round, first of all, I'd like to thank both teams, University of Maryland, College Park, and Clemson University, for your thoughtful arguments and commentary this afternoon and responses to the judges' questions. So if we can have a round of applause for both teams, please. For the semifinal match, in the end, Clemson is the winner for this round, with both majority as well as the score. The final scores were 105 for University of Maryland, 156 for Clemson, and Clemson took the majority in regards to the 3 votes from the judges. Okay? So congratulations to both of you. And Clemson, you have one more to go.